Welcome to This is Concrete, a podcast where we speak with the people whose work revolves around concrete and coatings. Let's get to what you came for.
Hello, Chad Gill here. I'm the host of the This is Concrete podcast, where I talk with leaders in facilities management, architecture, contracting, and more. This episode is brought to you by Concrete. Concrete is a concrete polishing and coatings company with nearly 20 years of experience working in commercial, industrial, and residential markets. So whether you need smooth transitions for a warehouse traffic, a show-stopping lobby floor, or a seamless concrete accent wall, we can provide the skill and imagination you need to make your concrete uncommon. So what are you waiting for? Visit us at thisisconcrete.com to learn more about Concrete today. So joining me today is Sarah McInerney. Sarah and I have worked together for a long time, longer than probably either one of us wants to admit that we've been doing it. She has a passion for historic buildings and extensive experience with the federal and state historic tax credit programs. She has designed and managed projects with Walter Parks Architects since 2003. She's a state certified architect, a senior project manager. And I didn't write this, but somebody else wrote this and said a senior project with decades of experience. I was like, oh my gosh, man, they're just rubbing it in now for both of us. In commercial work and some phenomenal restoration projects. That's how we met. It was on a cool restoration project. Sarah, thank you for coming in, and I really appreciate it. And I can't believe we've been working on things for 20 years.
I know. Thanks for having me.
I'm proud of you. That's awesome. So why, first, so I've run into a couple of people who are originally from Canada now. How long were you?
I lived there. I was born there and lived there all the way through high school. And then my parents, I immigrated with my parents for a job down here in Richmond. So I've been in Richmond pretty much ever since. With the exception of my little stint in Blacksburg for architecture school. But yeah, I've been in Blacksburg or Richmond ever since 1992. So I go back. Well, I haven't with COVID. I haven't been able to go back as often, and so all my family is still up there. But prior to COVID, we'd go at least once a year. So. Oh,
that's cool. No, we went to Mont Tremblant up there. It was fantastic. Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, just great place.
Yeah.
Well, so historic, how did you come to be like the specialist for historic renovations? And like, I know that's everything I've done with you has been pretty much that kind of stuff, but why, is it just a niche and it's a difficult system or what?
Well, I mean, really during, college, I actually had a love for the, differentiating the old and the new and just sort of acknowledging when there's something old and when you put something new with old, making that a special connection. And then I kind of fell into it, honestly. I ended up getting a job with Walter in 2003 and that's pretty much what he did or he was doing at the time. And it kind of was a perfect harmony in a way because I always liked it. And so we've been doing that work. My very first project with Walters was the American Tobacco Center down on 20th Street. And, it was kind of like, here, can you take care of this one? Like, sure. Yes. And so we were a small office at the time. We're still small, but we were smaller. We were only 6 people at the time. That included an office manager and Walter. So it was kind of figure it out and learn. And so I've just sort of figured it out and jumped in the pool 2 feet and I love it. And it's challenging. I understand it's more challenging than new construction. However, for me, it is actually less challenging because it's what I know. The architecture, they're all multifamily mostly always multi-family, and I prefer that. I love designing places for people to live. But the fabric of the building changes. So even though the product is kind of the same, that it's an apartment, the fabric, of what I'm starting with, the story of the building is different every time. And that's the exciting part, because I get to respond differently each time.
And some of these buildings you're doing, I mean, they're old bank buildings, old office buildings, old warehouses, factories. I mean, it's a wide gamut. And it's just, and I would think that there's a lot, like when you sit down and you're like, I'm going to draw a building. Well, blank slate, you're like, okay, that's difficult to start with. When you have a factory and you're like, I need to fit a building inside of this skeleton, I think that has some challenges and some limitations, and also, kind of forces you into, some things, and kind of corrals you a little bit. I would think that would work, help some.
Yeah. And I think, I will say that the blank slate, the blank sheet of paper is more intimidating to me than the mystery of the building. Because, you feel a little Indiana Jones when you get to go climb around and discover some stuff, and then you get to respond to it and, find the good, the best qualities of that building. What's fantastic about that building, and how can we share it and show it off and make sure the most amount of people, whether it's tenants or public, in the corridor, does just a tenant get that space, or do all the tenants get the space? And how can we share the good stuff with as many people as possible in that building?
So before we get into how it works, what's like the coolest hidden gem you found? Like, you're like, oh my gosh, we're tearing it down, and then boom, there's like an old safe, or there's a hidden room, or what's the coolest gem you kind of uncovered?
Recently, I don't know if it's the coolest. The Mutual building down at 9th and Main Street has like 3 fantastic safes, like with where you can see all the gears, and it's behind a glass panel. So that one's a really cool space. And we were able to, there were actually 3 of them. And we have it in a quiet lounge area, so that all of the tenants can experience the safe and be in the safe. That's kind of one of the coolest spaces right now. I think that yeah.
I know a lot of times they open up, and cool wood floors suddenly are there, terrazzo, very old shag carpet. It's interesting.
Yes, there's one that it's kind of on the boards right now, that's in Greensboro, that we lifted up exactly that shag. It was kind of gold or green shag carpet, and found some cork flooring, and that was pretty exciting.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful too, like with a pattern, and it's not just plain cork, but a patterned cork flooring. And so I'm hoping to be able to preserve that. I saw a corner of it. So
that's right. Love
and that building had barrel vaulted ceilings and wood paneling and all sorts of fun gems in it. Well,
how does it work? Like, why is this historic tax credit system, the state and federal, why do we need it? Why do they use it?
So there's a pretty big monetary incentive to save the buildings. And I'm going to talk very generally about it. There is a process, a 3-part process. One, your building has to be in a designated historic building. If it's not already in a neighborhood or a designated zone, you can adjust the zone to include your building, or you can nominate it on your own. And that is usually done by a historic tax credit consultant, so not by me. I come in with doing the part 2, where we put together a package of drawings that will say what we're going to do to the building. And then it's reviewed by the state of which the building's in. If it's in Richmond, or Virginia, it's the Department of Historic Resources here in Richmond. If it's in I also have some projects in North Carolina and South Carolina. So those are the state historic preservation offices for those states. They review them, they comment. There are a set of standards that the Department of Interiors has a standard, that's like a set of 10 rules. And those rules they're pretty clear, but they're also kind of big umbrella rules. So it can be interpreted differently from different reviewers. So it evolved over time as far as what's been allowable and what's not been allowable over the years. So they review it, the states review it. They usually have some conditions, windows, floors, brick, masonry, things like that. We tell them, so with our drawings, there's an application that describes what we want to do to the building. They review it. Once they've reviewed it, it goes to the National Park Service. They also review it. They usually will mirror the state's comments. Sometimes they have their own. And then once we get a letter from them all saying 2 thumbs up, we proceed with the project. Once the project's done, there's a part 3. And the part 3 basically is another application process that then shows we did what we said we were going to do. And then there's tax credits that are given. It's in around, when you do state and federal, so in and around 45% of the costs. And there's very specific costs that can be calculated. That's outside of my wheelhouse. But it's about 45%. And then those tax credits are often sold to investors within the project at about 80-ish cents on the dollar. So that's how there's equity built in through the tax credit program for the projects to go. So that's the monetary incentive to save the buildings. You're getting a pretty big discount off the top, but they're not cheap to renovate.
And then the reason behind the program is are they trying to do away with urban flight? Are they is the goal just, hey, these are big beautiful buildings and they want to keep them? Like why subsidize historic buildings when it would be sometimes cheaper, faster, easier to build a brand new building?
I think it has to do with saving the buildings. Because the Department of Interior standards and the standards that we have to adhere to are really about preserving the history of the building and telling the story. So they're really particular on, when we want to open up new windows, where we can open up new windows, so that the story of the building is intact. If there was an elevation that never ever had any windows on the front of the building, we can't put windows in there. It just never had them. You want to preserve the historic character of the building. So it's really, I think, more about preservation.
And it's probably, it's interesting. Like we were in Germany or France or somewhere, but one of the tour guides, he said, you know what the difference between Americans and Europeans are? And I was like, I don't know, I could probably list a few, but what are the ones?
Beer.
Yeah, exactly. Your beer is warm. What does it matter with you? But he said in the United States, 200 years is old, and in Europe, 200 miles is a long ways. And it was funny because historic tax credits. We're sitting in a place they're like, yeah, they're talking about what century it was built in. Over here, we're talking about what decade, perhaps.
Right.
And
and 50 years is old. Is a building that's 50 years old could be, if it had enough historic significance, could be eligible for the program.
So what is it?
We're looking at Burger King. No. Pizza Hut buildings almost qualified.
Like seriously, this Pizza Hut's important. Sarah McInerney ate here once.
Right.
Well, so when you're doing it, how do you balance with the drive for Wi-Fi and internet and modern conveniences and energy ratings and stuff like that. How do you fit all of that into an old brick shell? And like when you're looking at, here's a historic window that is almost a screen door because of the how energy efficient it is, but we need to keep it, and we need to keep a building running and that kind of stuff.
Fortunately, there's the Virginia or most of the states have an existing building, or all states have an existing building code. So we are exempt from some code requirements. With the philosophy of the code's philosophy is more in line with, you're making the building safer than it is today. So we do put sprinklers, and we, means of egress, and, so life safety is captured. Energy efficiency is often exempt. Clients will put in storm windows on the interior to preserve the existing windows, so that there's some energy efficiency. But, warehouses that are brick, I can't laminate and insulate on the inside or the outside. So there is leakage there. So the buildings are not necessarily energy efficient, but we make up for that elsewhere, and all the other services. Placing services is a very delicate ballet dance. The Department of Historic Resources in Chippewa don't like to see the services running down corridors anymore. They used to be okay with that. So we now have to tuck them into units, which then, means there's more, fire dampers and fire cucking between units because it's running, or you make a long chase. So hiding services so that they don't conceal any exposed structure. Hiding the existing structure is a no-no. You can drop ceilings over bathrooms, kitchens, some portions of the hallways and closets and stuff, but they really want to see as much of the existing structure exposed as possible. And so that comes through design as well. So, because plumbing needs to go up and down, I always shift my walls off of a column line so that those walls can be used, which also helps, accentuate the structure. You then see the steel, things like that. So.
Well, that makes sense, because if you're on the column line, you would go up and hit a header.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
I feel like that was probably an early lesson learned.
Yeah. Yeah.
So obviously the reason that I know you is because of the flooring side of it, and exposed concrete or hard surface flooring. That's what we do. Why does that help in historic buildings so much? Or does it?
Well, I'm limited. Again, it goes back to what was originally in the building. And, for example, the Mutual building has some areas that have concrete floor, but there was never concrete in that building. That never would have been exposed concrete because it was a finished space. There would have always been some sort of composite tile, most likely asbestos tile or asphalt tile. A lot of VCT was in there when we found it. Concrete would never have been a finish in a office space, so they won't permit. Even though it was the subsurface, we did have 2 rooms where the composite tile was gone, and the concrete looks good, and they won't permit us to polish or grind that. They want to see a composite tile down there. Even would not have been appropriate there, because we knew that a composite tile was there. So they like you to replace the flooring in kind. That's their language that they use. So if it was wood and we knew it was wood, it should be replaced in kind. And so in a lot of our buildings, we do have a lot of concrete, which makes it simple. And so we have the ability to grind, polish, stain, because it's the same surface. If we know that it's wood, we have to put wood back. And again, if we knew it was a composite tile, we put composite tile down, which is mostly LVT these days.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
No, very specifically though, non-wood, non-stone looks. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So a composite tile has to be just a composite tile. It can't look like wood or stone, which I will just admit I have no problem with that rule because I'm not for fake wood.
But yeah,
Be
it's like
authentic.
that's right.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Is it a different group of people that want to live in historic buildings? Is it a different kind of market for the apartment building? Or is it, I mean, some people want chic, modern apartments and stuff like that. Is this a different group? Or is it just kind of like, hey, this is the end thing and they rent well and that kind of thing?
I think that I think a lot of it, I think a lot of people do like the character. I will say I don't get much into the renting, and I do usually, try to know, who's living here. Are we near a college? Are we near, a hospital? So kind of assuming who's going to be living here, and are we going to have families? Because there's good schools or so I usually like to know that. That's helpful. The mix of the units 1s and 2s are usually directed by the client, because they've done their research on that. But I think that there's such good character. Each unit's so different. Even in their layouts, they have to be, because it's usually like a giant puzzle to put these units together to fit with, responding to windows and doors and circulation that exists. So very often we don't have very many unit types that are similar. When we can, we do. Stacking is nice, but we don't always get to stack either. But and then I think the other thing about apartments is location, and a lot of the locks downtown. That was one of the ones I worked on. That location just premium to me. You're right in the center, right on the canal walk. If you work downtown, young professionals right out of school working at the law offices and such, you don't even need a car. But there's still parking if you did. So I think there's a lot of that location, because a lot of these buildings, especially the historic buildings, are usually often are near rivers. I guess not all of them. The mills are always near rivers. And then sometimes they're really close to trains, which is not always ideal.
Well, what they say, when you live there, you won't even hear it. I don't know.
Right. Depending on what time of day.
Yeah, you can get used to anything. I mean, if you're a law clerk, hell, you're not going to be in your apartment much anyway.
Right. Right.
But well, no, that's pretty cool. No, it's I know that we run into you find a lot of satisfaction and frustration as you try to navigate. You're like, but this just doesn't. Sometimes you look at a historic renovation and you're like, well, this it'd be so easy to do this. Like the floors are rough and like we could pour an overlay and we'll just fix all these problems. You're like, I'm not here to. That's not what we want. Like you said, you're muffling that story that's there for the building, and that's the reason to do it. It's like you can do all of that, you just can't do all of that and consider it a historic renovation.
Right. Yeah. It's nice to tell the story and to see the scars actually, versus having a perfect pristine floor. We were looking at one the other day where there's an old bathroom that's kind of, there's the penny tile that's still there, and there's some patches from where doors and walls were, and it's kind of like just let's infill those patches where the missing tile is with the concrete, and it tells the story a little bit more. Unless it's going to look really rough, then maybe that tile comes up. But this is such a small area, but it's kind of fun to tell the story. Mutual building is similar to that, where we have terrazzo, and then the offices had terrazzo down the corridors originally, and wood was in all the offices. So where the original walls were, which have been long gone, would have been a terracotta block wall with plaster on either side. And so when we get the building, those walls are gone, and those where the walls were filled in with concrete. So you have this interesting pattern of terrazzo with this very consistent stripe of concrete with wood. So it really tells you exactly where the original walls were. What we've done before when concrete wasn't filled in or we were taking walls down, we would actually infill those pieces of wood with a different type of wood to accentuate the story.
That's pretty neat. No, I mean, I know. I mean, sometimes we go in these places that even have plaques and I have like old photos and explanations and stuff like that, so that you can really kind of follow what why it's done that way, and so it's really interesting. And I can vouch for the fact that we go in the building and it just looks like a bomb went off, and we're grinding floors, and then we come back later and you're like, oh my gosh, this actually turned into something. That's pretty amazing.
Right. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Often.
That is great, Sarah. I really appreciate you kind of being with us on it and telling them, because I think for some of the smaller subcontractors like us, sometimes you don't understand what the purpose behind it is, and you just look at things, get in the mode of trying to build things fast and build things well, and you don't realize that that there's an overall a different goal in mind. And I think Historic Renovations definitely have their own North Star. It's not about building it fast, building it efficient, it's about preserving that story. And I think that's I think I'm glad to do that, because around down the Canal Walk and stuff like that, and you see these old buildings, hey, they used to bring in the big hogsheads here. This used to be, a tobacco barn and factories. I mean, it's just, it's part of the history of Richmond. And if we tear them all down and build them back brand new, it just looks like this place was nothing but marketing and law firms. So, I'm pretty sure that during the Civil War and stuff, there were no marketing and law. I'm sure there were.
There were lawyers.
They're marketing too, but just probably not dedicated. But that's awesome. But thanks for joining us on it, and thanks for obviously being with us on projects as well. But this thing is a great thing to kind of let people hear a little bit about.
Yeah, great. I appreciate it. It was fun.
No problem. Thank you, Sarah. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to This is Concrete. We look forward to you joining us next time. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.